Yes, yes, yes. It's another Sunday. And as we say, Richie, if it is Sunday,
it is Sunday Scoops time.
Welcome, welcome everyone. Today we have lined up for you the big, bad, monster reggae dancehall artist, Frankie Paul. And
keep going, man. Keep going.
Brethren, you take up after them. Pass the button. You just talk about school and thing, and you're going like, oh, I forget you're a cricketer. You never used to run. That's why.
You saw people out harder. But seriously, in the 70-odd years that Jamaicans have been producing its own music, I think it is fair to say that as a country, we have an embarrassment of riches. A lot of talent. Huge, significant. And among that crop of riches was Paul Blake, better known as Frankie Paul. One of, without question, the best vocalists to have come out of Jamaica. And without any doubt, despite the point at which he came, his career was significant, and he gifted Jamaica with a treasure trove of music. And today we're going to use the opportunity to revisit that career of Jamaica Stevie Wonder, Frankie Paul. Of course, we're going to return to the beginning of Frankie Paul's career, but Tidal Wave is a George Pang product. Sly and Robbie, and there's a big story, a big backstory behind those early music that George Pang did with Sly and Robbie. But today we're gonna focus exclusively on Frankie Paul. Started singing at an early age. In fact, he was born blind, and had I think somewhere around 8 years old, he had the opportunity to get some work done on his eyes, and they restored sight in one of his eyes, partial restoration of sight. And but he nevertheless continued his education at the Salvation Army School for the Blind, and he earned this moniker as Jamaica Stevie Wonder. For one, Stevie Wonder was his idol, so to speak, in terms of his music, and in particular, Frankie Paul became not just it wasn't just that his vocals were powerful. He was also a multi-instrumentalist in terms of his ability. Played the piano, played a number of string and wind instruments, but without a doubt stamped his class in terms of how he used the whatever disadvantages he had, he turned them into advantages and built a significant career. And we're gonna, huge catalog, some 48 albums. We're gonna, do our best to try and give you listeners out there a taste, particularly for some of the lovers in the house. Frankie Paul have some of the sweetest, what we call them, Garth?
Lovers rock cover versions too.
A lot of cover versions, but again, we're gonna touch on this thing. We're gonna go back to the beginning of his career at somewhere around 7-8 years old, while he was at the Salvation Army School for the Blind. 1976, Stevie Wonder visited Jamaica and visited the Salvation Army School for the Blind, and of course, you can imagine a youngster like that, if this was his idol and the idol visiting, and he had an opportunity to sing for Stevie Wonder. And according to Dog newspaper, Stevie Wonder encouraged him to keep singing, and keep singing he did. By the time he left the School for the Blind at around 14-15 years old, he was on the street basically singing for his supper, and he got a pickup. They took him to I think it was, what the studio name got?
It was High
Times Studio, and he would open his account with I think you have 3 pieces of
African Princess, Babylon Man, and Give the Youth a Chance. Tell the elders not to fight them. Although you have some youth nowadays, trust me, Richie, the music that I make.
Yeah, but the music is really just a reflection of the times. You know. I'm of that view. We can be as critical as we want. But one thing is true about Jamaican music is that if you listen long enough, well, let me put it another way. If you really want to know what's going on in Jamaica at any point in time, just take the time out, listen to the music. That is the thing. 1983, this is Frankie Paul as a teenager, 15, 16 years old. And essentially, you know, repeating the same call that came through from the 60s and the 70s to give the youth them, you know, the opportunity just to find a space for themselves. And, you know, this is what is the messaging is the same. 20 years later, and, you know, even today, we're having the same issues. But Frankie Paul was essentially opening his account at this point in time. And of course, what we got treated to then was the beginning of a prolific production approach to music that I don't think any other artist before or since, has applied themselves to the music in the way that Frankie Paul has had.
And one of his trademark too is calling his own name in his songs. The third person, you know.
Well, you know, them have a saying in a life, you know, if you don't believe in it yourself, you can't expect anybody else to believe in you. And, you know, when you have the kind of disability, for most people anywhere, you lose your sight, you lose any of your senses and the tendencies that people fall up. And he was not prepared to do that. And more importantly, he got an opportunity and he decided to grab it with both hands.
He also was, you know, part of an alma mater of brilliant musicians who had sight impairment. Apart from Stevie Wonder, I'm talking Jamaican, homegrown, like Derek Morgan, the Cooper brothers. Let me tell you, man, yeah. It's phenomenal what those guys have done in the music.
Well, what is even more of a phenomena is the catalog that Frankie Paul would eventually turn out. Now, he got, having gotten this introduction, you know, grabbed it with both hands. He participated with, it was Channel 1 had put out a series, what you call them?
Showdown. The
Showdown series. And he appeared on that Showdown series with Sugar Minott on the one hand, and then I think on another set with Little John. And we're going to sample some of that music from
a couple of them for you. Traveling Man, Girl Is Mine, and also one of the early Channel 1 outings that he did before Henry Jonjola's redid it was Worries in the Dance. You know, so we're going to look at a couple of those songs. Starting out with Traveling Man. Well, Richard, this song immediately arrests your attention and let you realize exactly what was happening in the dance hall at that time. And as we just talked about, Frankie Paul, easily one of the most prolific dancehall / singer artists we can ever have in Jamaica. In the same ilks as Barrington Levy, Johnny Osborne, and Sugar Minott.
Well, you know, listen, we have Colin Hines in the studio with us, and we're not afraid for a thing. We have shine light on him. We have bad man him up.
Monroe Youth.
Yeah, you know, good school still. Not take none from him. A good school, man. Young boy went to a good school. Can't fault that. And the Ropers in my days as a cadet was the man them who thing. But back to the music and thing. And Colin made the point about in the 1980s, when Frankie Paul is rising like the phoenix now, right? What was happening was radio had a man like Barry G.
Yeah.
And what Barry G was doing with radio was transformative.
And it was unheralded.
Absolutely. And so what we ended up with too is not only that, you have, first of all, remember, Jamaica had changed. We just come out of the big bad election with the gunman and the thing. So the entertainers were now charged, if you will, with almost a responsibility. Take it from there, Colin.
Yeah, the music was changing. It was becoming less angst-ridden and more geared towards fun, party. And what Barry G did was he pretty much kind of integrated the essence of dancehall
into the radio
in a
station.
very classy way which didn't violate broadcast principles or broadcast best practices at the time. He seamlessly kind of merged the two, so you were able to hear songs like the ones we just heard. You were able to hear, I remember as a young student in Teachers College hearing the song Books by Supercat for the first time. And I was telling you guys off air the impact it had on me. And I realized the power of radio, the power of a presenter, and it's something which now kind of instructed and informed how I manage the media myself. But yeah, the people like Barry G helped to bridge the gap between the dance hall and the more formal medium of dissemination, which was radio. And it was just a wonderful time. And Frankie Paul was a star. I was ripe for the pickings. He did some of his best music was coming out at the time for John Laws and all of these top producers then.
I think as the show progresses and we run through this catalog, because in the latter stages he did a lot of reworking of other people's music. But to your point, Colin, and Garth, we talked about this earlier. Frankie Paul came into the business almost at, you could say, if ever there was a right time for somebody, this was it. Without a doubt.
The reason why I laugh is because earlier this week, when Colin and I was on the road, we're talking about if it's a song's time, no matter who the artist is, that song is going to be a hit. So sometimes you have some people who do a little tune and them think it hype. But if the song was really to be a hit, nobody on the planet can stop that song.
True that.
And Shabarang said, DJ ears cock up when they hear boom rhythm. So from the average person who's into music hear a song that's going to be a hit, they'll know that song is going to be a hit. And nothing can stop that song.
Well, when Frankie Paul, and we want to go back, because War is in the Dance, and you played the two variations of it.
Right.
You played the early
Channel 1.
The early Channel 1, and then you played John Laws, and again, Colin made that point, and God, we looked at these producers over the years. John Laws was a hell of a producer, right? When you talk about creativity, when you talk about inventiveness, because here is a man who Wars in the Dance was already a big song.
A big song.
Right? And when he took it with Frankie Paul, it became a monster of a song.
Because he put it on the diseases, the mad rhythm.
Absolutely. And it was, again, we see that though coming out of, go back to the late 60s and the 70s, where studios weren't prepared to create a wicked rhythm and it was the one tune for it. John Laws, that was a Coxsone thing, but Jonjo took that in an entirely different direction. But again, this show is not Jonjo Laws. This show is Frankie Paul. And War is in the Dance, and the music that came out of this era. And we're going to touch on a few more of them, but we're up on a break. And so, now Colin, you raise a question. Which I think is a very valid issue to look at. I mean, we're looking at the man's career. But did his disability provide any kind of a detraction, from a public perspective, or the public's perception of him? Did his disability diminish that in any way?
Right. The esteem in which his music ought to have been held.
Right.
Was he adored enough? Was he given the kind of accolades enough? Because he was partially blind.
And my answer to that would be no.
You don't think so?
I don't think so. I think the mere fact, as we said in the chat room, where the people want to look for murder me with the Dennis Brown thing. Because that's it. When in Jamaica, people love you as an artist, them love you in spite of.
Look at Yellow Man.
Regardless, right? And even though we go down that road, Frankie Paul was good enough. What I would say to you is that in time, and maybe this was a case of how you manage somebody who was never prepared for the level of success. And I think that he basically fell into his own way, right? Because he eventually, as quickly as he got there, within 5 years, he was the top vocal dancehall singer in not just in Jamaica, but in the business, right? And the demand for him was high everywhere. He in fact, that is the reason why he lived in London part-time. He lived in New York part of the time as well. So he was splitting his time between the three geographical locations because of the demand placed on him. But that demand in the 1980s, what was happening in the 80s? The biggest scourge of the world in the 80s was the powder.
Yes. Yeah, it was cocaine, yeah.
Right?
Cocaine and then crack.
And then the next level of it was crack cocaine. And I think from all he himself confessed that he got himself.
Yeah, I think it's not an urban legend or myth. That was his demon.
Right.
He had struggles based on all we've heard with substance abuse. Seemingly couldn't shake it, and it kind of dogged him.
Dogged him for quite a while.
And I heard, and this is anecdotal, that it also dipped into his pocket because it's clearly an expensive habit to sustain. Frankie Paul, though, and you guys may get to it before you close, also was not handled fairly from the business side of music, or maybe he was not knowledgeable enough to handle his business.
Let me take that point, because it is a feature of the music business globally,
Specifically
right?
Jamaican music.
But well, I guess we know more about Jamaican music than we know about the music elsewhere. But the reality is that the music, you don't really make the money of the song singing. You make money about the publishing rights, the creative component of the music. Who really controls that? And that has been a demon that has dogged, almost with the exception of the Marleys and just a handful of others. That has been a demon that has strafed everybody in the music business in Jamaica. And so he no less. I don't think there's nothing in his background that would have said that there was any preparation to deal with the management side of his business. And then if you look at the people who were his producers, let's call a spade a spade. The
man in the street would say he was robbed. He didn't get what he ought to have gotten from the kind of catalog that he had. The amount of time he opened his mouth in front of a microphone to sing a song. Frankie Paul, in the end, and I know people who know him who were trying to help to find funds to aid and abet him in his last days. It should never have amounted to that. He should have been an overly wealthy man, but this seems to be a common denominator amongst many of that generation and a half set of artists. Some of them along the way caught up, got business people involved to kind of manage what they could, recoup what they could, and you don't make that joke now though with a youngster like a Chronix or a Project.
No, that's not going to happen to them. These guys, they know the business now, yes.
And this is where music was a purely fun thing and something from a lot of these guys.
In the 1980s, there was
nothing to show.
In the 1980s, what I think, again, one of my, if I was to ever find myself in a position where of any kind of influence in this business, it would be to say to anybody who is interested in the entertainment business, before you open your mouth,
learn the business.
Learn the business side. In fact, in 2001, my good friend and attorney at the time, John Graham, gave me a book. I managed Ninja Man right? A little thing we did between 2000 and 2001, 2002, that kind of brought him back. And we were trying a thing, really. And John said to me, let me tell you things with this business. He gave me a book called The Business of This Business of Music, about a 3-inch thick book. I said, go read that. And if when you're done read it, if you're still interested in the thing, then, but don't call me. He said, the first thing with the music business is, it is not what you think it is.
Nice.
And so that was the first time it kind of opened my eyes. There's so many elements, so many moving parts in terms of writing, publishing, putting a song out there. A lot of times we think that these guys are singing a whole heap of song.
So them rich.
And they don't have jack.
No.
Because the person who, first of all, you have to, who make the song happen? You have to look at the people who producing the song, the people who are recorded, the people who put all of this technology and equipment and business together. And so them give you a piece of paper and you sign on the dotted line. And like in the harder they come, you get £20 for the tune. And that's it. And you don't realize that if a man come and write and change one note in the song, him have a little claim in terms of the creative side of the music.
Publishing.
So
I don't want to pour cold water on some of our legendary producers and music executives, but if we're going to be frank about this discussion, no pun intended, someone like Frankie Paul was robbed blind, no pun intended again, right? Where I think it was common practice for music makers, executives, and so on to not volunteer light on the dark of these artistic
the
people.
guts of the business.
They chose to keep it secret,
Right.
and not say anything because the money found its way into the pockets of those who had enough. So there were these talents, these kids like Frankie Paul, making great songs, and it was fun. And you tour and you get some girl and you this and you live in the moment of what you were given. But a lot of people coming up to this day and age never realized that the true money lied in who wrote the song, who made the song, how much of it was handled by your legal luminaries behind the scene, that if a man sample it or use it in a commercial, is not producer XYZ, just quietly, because you signed away your life to him, without understanding that, A, there are things for me to get from this, and it's a business relationship. You know, it's going to studio go voice because a man make a little book, and you jump on it. And so, many of our greats fell on hard times because they didn't handle the business.
And Frankie Paul fell on that hard time in his later years.
Yes. Cassandra, close to you. Better you, better me tomorrow.
We asked a question earlier. What was the question, Colin?
Has the music business been good and fair to people like Frankie Paul?
Delroy Wilson.
Were they abused by those knowledgeable and who were keeping that knowledge a secret?
I believe the short answer to that is no, it has not been good to them. In fact, if you pose this question in the 60s when the music just started, we could claim ignorance on all sides. But by the time we got to here, in the 1980s, the technology had changed. The approaches to you know, all of the elements, the exposure to all of the elements that contributed to the music. I believe a lot of these producers kept the artists in ignorance, in a state of ignorance. And I believe that Frankie Paul, no less than the others.
So what drove that? Greed?
I believe that it was greed. It was all for myself. If I can get the artists a little crumbs fall off at the table. Remember, the artists love the music because
it's a passion.
It's a passion, and for a lot of them, if you go back to the early days of recording music, Jamaicans were into recording music because of the idea of hearing their voices on a record. And a lot of that, especially in a low education environment that has been Jamaica for the better part of a move from the 70s up to the 1980s, that would not have been any different. And so people who understood the business, who had the money and who could invest in the technology and put the facilities in, recognized, they knew better than the artists that 5-10 years down the road is when this catalog of work is going to have a value. If you sign it off and give me, you don't have nothing to forget. I pay you for the tune already.
So they preyed on ignorance and had youngsters, talented youngsters, and this happened for years, come and port their art onto tape, made these great songs, but there was nobody to illuminate the business side, the real important thing of, listen, this is your hard work, this is your labor, you may love it, but yes, but when your hobby becomes your calling and your mission and your chance to sustain yourself in life, you have to have all the things them connected. Frankie Paul them clearly.
It proved
never
itself.
Understand the legal aspects and the business aspects.
Absolutely. You can't have a man who have produced so much music, 48 albums, is a whole heap of music that is.
Struggle to meet his medical
and him
bills.
have a medical bill, him can't pay for the dialysis. Him end up losing foot because him have diabetes.
Not just that
Right?
too. He was also philanthropic in his own way because he adopted a couple of kids.
Yeah, but and
then you have those children to support.
True, but the bottom line is the
bottom
people
line
around, the people behind him who were literally, every time a pound of corn throw in at the trough, them eat out 14 and a half ounces.
There you go.
Right? And so the ounce and a half left of a serve him and everybody else.
No, but the
around him.
ounce and a half that was left.
And
they
take that
wanted a
more of that,
portion
yeah.
of that ounce and a half.
Absolutely. So that has been the story behind the music business, and we beat with chest and we say how much music we give to the world and things. But we need to lift up the covers and look and see how naked the people who made this music remained long after. We watched Delroy Wilson become an alcoholic, cirrhosis of the liver, lick him down, and him couldn't even bury him. Him couldn't find $2 for bury him, right?
Look at the catalog.
And look at his catalog. And the same thing happened with Frankie Paul. Frankie Paul, God bless what.
So let's be honest here, because I don't know if I said this in previous programs. Do we have some wicked producer and wicked, may I talk, wicked, evil, malicious, malfeasant individuals who've made great songs with talented people, but have robbed them blind and are evil people at heart? Some people are we hold in high esteem. Talk truth.
I would, it's a difficult thing to answer otherwise, because the facts speak for themselves. If you have a man with the kind of catalog that Frankie Paul has left us with, who struggled to pay his hospital.
He was swimming with sharks then.
Yes, not some sharks and barracuda, everybody, piranha, right? And the minute if him take him eye off of them, him gone.
Is it their fault though?
Who, you mean the people who run the
barracudas
business?
and the sharks.
Because they're just being barracudas and
Excellent
sharks.
question. People will always be who they are.
Why didn't the Frankie Pauls, and you can name some of these artists who died poor, why didn't they seek knowledge? How come them never know these things?
And that's an easy question to answer. If you don't know, you don't. One of the things
What
about
you don't
not
know, you just
knowing,
don't know.
when not knowing is not just about being in a state of
Ignorance.
ignorance. If you were never provided with any kind of exposure as to what it is that you are actually involved in,
Fair point.
everything that you do is peripheral.
Fair point.
You sing a song and you watch what happened in America. Man put bust some music and the studio come and give him a car, and him feel that, oh shit, I'm get a nice car, but the studio give him a car because the money where the studio will make off of the record can buy the factory will make the car, and they will never tell him that.
And they will never tell him that we're going to recoup the money for that car.
Oh, and you
And also-
going to pay for this car
Exactly.
Because the devil's in the details and they don't read the details.
Yeah. Hi there. If you enjoyed that clip, go on over to our website at yardmedia.com, where you can watch the entire broadcast at your leisure. And while you're there, why don't you check out our other reggae music features? And before you leave, pick up some of our Jamaican reggae merchandise, and hey, don't forget to tell your friends.